I'd like to talk about the latest immigration figures, partly because they're so shocking, partly because my miserable predictions are coming true, which is always a very unpleasant surprise, and partly to scotch the idea, or mainly to deal with the argument that we need mass immigration or any immigration at all in order to keep our economy going. That's the justification that's repeatedly put forward. It's nonsense. It's total lies. The opposite is the case. My view is that the one tonic, the one benefit, the big benefit that our economy needs is the humane repatriation of tens of millions of people out of our country. I think that can be achieved. I think it will be achieved, and I think it can be done humanely. I think if we want to, we can peacefully and humanely remigrate 99% of foreign populations or more from our country if we want to. And so I want to deal with why such an extreme claim is the case. But firstly, I'd like to deal with another extreme claim that I made. If you see there, now if I do that, that was a video I did 6 months ago. I was asking why do they do this? Why are they doing this to us? And particularly why do we get mass immigration? What I was looking at, that table there shows that's a BBC chart showing mass immigration arrivals to June 2022. It was 1.1 million. By December 2022, it had gone up to 1.2 million. What I said is, well, within another year, I reckon that'll be 1.5, 1.6 million. And lo and behold, if I go over to here, the next one, these are the main figures. What this shows is that this is the gov.uk summary of latest statistics, immigration system stats year ending December 2023. Now they're always fiddling around with formats. For once they've done it in a way that makes the numbers a little bit clearer. So I cannot understand that. I am completely baffled as to why they would do that. Maybe it's because maybe they're telling lies. It wouldn't surprise me, and they're trying to hide the fact that they're telling lies, but I don't know. I'll take them at face value. Now here are the summary of UK immigration system year ending December 2023. So those purple lines coming in, that's numbers coming in. I'm not dealing with net migration here. I think the net figure so far is for the 12 months of 2023 is, I think, 672,000. I don't like the net figure. You just don't know what the overall numbers are, how many are coming in, how many are leaving. I mean, if you have 10 million coming in and 9.9 million going out, the government would say, great, that's net immigration is down to 100,000. Isn't that great? It doesn't take account of the replacement numbers, and also treats us as interchangeable units, which everyone by now realizes we just are not. Now, so I want to look at the total numbers coming in, and I'm able to do it from the figures they give. So if I go through these numbers here, safe and legal humanitarian routes, those are previously established routes where the government has said you can fly here from this country and we will let you in, usually for asylum or for humanitarian reasons. The classic case at the moment is Ukraine, people coming over, flying over from Ukraine, and they can settle in the UK. Now in 2023, the numbers you did, also people coming in from Hong Kong. So you just get on a plane, fly in via that safe and legal humane route. That's 102,000 in 2023. Then visitor visas, that was 1.95 million. That's supposed to be people who are on short stay visitors, just coming for a holiday, a visit to visit family. That's not supposed to count as long-term numbers coming in. I think it probably does. Some of those will, because some of those will then go down to this number here, asking for an extension of stay. Oh, I came for a holiday and I suddenly discovered that I'm an asylum seeker, that kind of thing. Or I've got to stay because my grandmother's fallen ill whilst I was here. All right, but let's take it at face value, not count the visitors' visas. So safe and legal humanitarian, that's 102,000. Now the next, visas granted for study, that's 606,000. So 102 plus 606, that's 708,000. And then for work, that's 616, I think that is. So 708, 616, that's 1.3 million and 24, so 1.1,324,000, and then family reunification, that's 81,000. So you add that on top, that comes up to about 1.4 million and 5,000. And then if you look here, people claiming asylum, that's 84. So if you add that 1.4 million plus 5,000 plus 84,000, that's I make that 1.489, so 1,489,000 people coming in. That's 1.5 million people coming in, which is that's what I said there 6 months ago. I thought that would happen, and I seem to have been proved right. I think the number for net migration, it always seems to get revised up. So UK net migration in 2022 revised up. It went up from 606,000 to 745. That's quite a big upward revision. I think something else will happen here. So I think my prediction of it coming to 1.5 to 1.6 million within a year, that was about right. Now, my point is that is nuts. There is no justification for doing that. The reason our enemy politicians are doing that to us is because they are our enemies. There's the old Aristotle quote, which I saw recently, which says that it's the habit of tyrants to prefer foreigners to his own citizens because he sees no threat from foreigners, whereas he sees his own citizens as potential enemies. And I think that's still the case today, that people in power want more power. It's much easier to get more power over you if they can grind you down, make you poorer, make you more miserable, make you more dependent and docile. You become more manageable. That's the purpose of mass immigration. The purpose of mass immigration is repression, plain and simple. It has no other benefit. It certainly has no economic benefit. I want to try and give you some idea of why that is. It is crazy for us to import 1.4 million people supposedly to dig us out of the hole we're in because we're too lazy and parasitic to work for ourselves. When we have 2.8 million people on long-term sick. So this is a Guardian report recently, that's from February this year. Figures released last week by the Office for National Statistics illustrated the extent of the problem. The number of people saying they are inactive due to long-term sickness is now 2.8 million, an increase of more than 200,000 in the last year and of 700,000 since the pandemic started in 2020. And you can see that in a recent video from this BBC fella. I found it quite likeable, but I don't know how accurate he is, this fella, Ros Atkins, dealing with the long-term sick problem. There it's 2.75 million, but that is a huge number. If you've got that many people economically inactive and claiming benefits, that is the thing to challenge. And the worst thing you can do in order to get to reduce that number is to import a large amount of cheap foreign labour. Now, I'll go through why that is. The one thing we need to do to reduce that number and to get into a virtuous cycle of reducing that number is to remove very large numbers of foreign cheap labourers, cheap workers, foreigners who came into this country. If you remove them, you'll see that number going down. Now, I think that number, call me a cynic, call me a lot of people, I'm sure, people accuse me of being unkind because I think the welfare state is a snot-sucking scam. I think it's just a way we worship the NHS as an excuse to suck state liquidized pizza up our nose tubes and into our brains. You don't have to be as cynical as me to see that, well, this is in part about incentive. This is human nature. If you can have as good a life on sickness benefit as you can have working, there's every incentive to go on sickness benefit. And there are strong indicators that this is the case. If you look at this story, that's from February, less than a month ago, more people in their early 20s are out of work from ill health than in their early 40s due to that study. And that's from the Resolution Foundation. I think they're fairly well regarded. Now, if it were the case that it was purely about genuine sickness, illnesses affect people in their 40s more than they affect people in their 20s in general. You're much more likely to find an invalid in his 40s than in his 20s. Partly because someone in the 40s is much more likely to have had an accident than someone in their 20s because they've lived twice as long. So that suggests to me there is that's a social trend, that's a psychological trend. There is incentive going on there. Now, the other one that I'd look at is World War One. It's been said quite often that the modern welfare state has produced more invalids than World War One did. Now, and that's that understates the situation. If you look at this quote, in Britain alone, almost 1 million soldiers, sailors, and airmen had been killed. Around 2 million came home with some disability. Over 40,000, so only 40,000 were amputees. Some had facial disfigurement, well, that doesn't stop you working, or had been blinded. Even that didn't necessarily stop you working. Others suffered from deafness, no, tuberculosis or lung damage caused by poison gas. And it's difficult to know that there were all kinds of, these people weren't simply put on sickness benefit, stay at home and sit and rot. There were all kinds of programs to try to get people into work again. That the Disabled Soldiers Handbook, government campaigns. I wonder who will employ me now. That's a disabled man. You see him as disabled from World War One, and don't pity a disabled man. Find him a job. That was the idea, and you had all kinds of the programs to find prostheses, sort of wooden legs and wooden arms that would work in a way that would allow people to work. And this, remember, this was in an age where most labour was manual, which is not the case today. I would estimate that probably a bit over half of those 1 million 2 million who came home with some disability actually were able to work. So if you compare that with that number there, 2.75 million, so somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million. I reckon that the modern welfare state was created somewhere between 2 and 3 times the number of invalids that World War One created. So that suggests to me that there is the incentive plays a big role in that, and what is necessary is to reverse that incentive. Now, I want to go through one or two of the arguments as to why it is so necessary for us to have mass immigration. One argument is it's great for the economy. The bustling diversity has created the economic boom that we're all experiencing now. And we the English, we don't know how to work. We're all too lazy. We're all a bunch of couch potatoes. We wouldn't do a hand's turn in our lives. We're incapable of it. It's only these foreigners generously coming here, like the Windrush generation, who came here out of the goodness of their hearts in order to dig us out of the hole we were in, because we were incapable of doing it. And that generosity, that hard-working devotion to our welfare, that slavish devotion to our welfare, that has continued ever since and continues to this day. Well, it's not quite the case, because if you look at this one, this is a website called Statista. I think it puts government statistics into charts. This is a simple one. UK unemployment rate in the UK as of second quarter 2023 by ethnicity. You see the average there is 4.1%, and Bangladesh is 10.3%. Pakistanis 9.7%, blacks 7.2%, Indian 7.1%. Indians are the ones who are often getting pointed out to us as fantastically hardworking and the most entrepreneurial people on God's earth. Well, that's unemployment rate is 7.1%, which is a bit over twice the white rate. So the idea that we're being saved from awarded a life of idle luxury on welfare by these millions coming here, that's just nonsense. And the next one is the altar of the NHS. So I get so sick of the religion of the NHS. It is not worthy of worship. It is it is the one thing that inflates the cost of healthcare. It's been described as our future is a health system with a government attached. That is the future of British society, this ever-expanding, inefficient health service, inflating costs at every turn, and this tiny little thing called the government next to it. And that is where our public life is headed. And it is not being held together by mass migration. If you look at this chart here, that's from the House of Commons library. What that says is of every 1,000 NHS staff in England, 813 are British, so 81%. That probably more or less reflects the ethnic makeup. That is in spite of a really aggressive drive to, and all kinds of visa exemptions and fast get-rich-quick visas to the UK if you are a health service and an adults care service worker. You can get in fast, make loads of money, get loads of bonuses, and even that has only resulted so far in 18.7% of the health NHS staff being foreigners, and 52 of them, or 5%, are from the EU anyway. So I just don't think this is people coming from the third world saving us from our ill health. And the result of it, I think, can be seen in this chart. This comes from The Spectator. This is GDP. That's the blue line is GDP, and the red line is GDP per capita. So what the country is producing, that's the blue line, and the red line is what we're producing per head of the population. Yes, per capita, per number of Brits per capita. And what you see is GDP since the end of 2019, that's gone up 1%. What you see is GDP production per head, that's gone down by 1.5%. We're becoming less productive. And I think that has quite a lot to do with these numbers coming in, those numbers claiming benefits, and the fact that a lot of people are imported simply as cheap labour for big business. Now, the people that benefits, what that does is to you is two things. It reduces your pay, it dilutes your wages, because more labour coming in means that there's a bigger supply of labour. Employers don't have to offer so much money. Particularly, it disproportionately affects the small pool of people who are negotiating new jobs, i.e. people who are applying for new jobs and taking on new jobs. That's quite a small sector of the population. So when you have a large influx of people, all of whom will be doing the same thing, that is where wage rates get decided. So it has a disproportionate effect on wage rates. It dumps wage rates. What it simultaneously does is to increase the costs of living, so capital costs, housing costs, things you need to buy in order to survive. The people who benefit are people who are making, particularly larger businesses who are making things, objects, goods that people need in order to live. Say major supermarkets would be one, or banks would be another, or major landowners would be another. Smaller businesses tend to supply labour. They tend to be in consulting work, which again will get diluted if labour becomes more and more plentiful, because labour becomes just a cheaper commodity. That has a downward pressure on smaller businesses that are simply supplying labour. But if you're a larger business providing goods that people need in order to survive, what you get is a higher demand, which means you can keep your prices high, and so higher prices and more demand for those things. So selling more things at a higher price, and your labour costs get lower and lower. So your profit margins will just grow and grow. So that's really who benefits from that. And the result of that is ordinary people become more and more dependent on state handouts, more feeling that they need to stand in line where the man with the upper class accent tells them to. And so as a result of that, you get this, which is taxes as a percentage of GDP. A more dependent population requires more in welfare, will make more demands on the welfare state. And as a result of that, because most state spending is about welfare, what you're seeing really since 2020 is a very sharp rise in tax as a percentage of GDP. Effectively, it's about where it was in the years after World War II, which is when the highest, we basically flattened our economy in order to win World War II, taking on massive debts, and then after World War II, taking on huge debts from America, which we then had to repay by taxing the population high. We haven't had any world wars since then, and our tax rate as a percentage of GDP is at that level. So that is the overall effect on the economy. That mass immigration is very damaging towards the economy. The best thing I think we could do, the best tonic, would be peacefully, humanely to return tens of millions of people to their ancestral homelands. And this is an example of what it means to your day-to-day costs. Every month when you're thinking, can I afford to pay rent? Can I afford to make this mortgage payment? Will I ever be able to buy a house? The house building crisis, the UK's 4 million missing homes. That's the Centre for Cities. I think that's a research organisation. I don't think they have a particular axe to grind, but basically 4 million missing homes. When you have 4 million missing homes, the demand for housing becomes red hot, and it certainly is in cities or in towns within striking distance of cities. And that's bad news for ordinary people. I personally, I think that the housing shortage that's been created by mass immigration is it's a sort of a minor human rights crime, I think, against the poorer mass of the indigenous population. So I think that if we stop mass immigration, far from it being the case that we need mass immigration in order to keep our economy alive, I think the exact opposite is the case. I think mass immigration is being done in order to make us poorer, in order to make us more ground down, to take away any sense of identity, to make us more docile, compliant, more manageable, because people who have power want more of it. Mass immigration is about repression. That's the purpose of it. And I think that is the case. It is not to help our economy. I think the one thing our economy needs is the mass humane repatriation. And I think that is possible. Hold on, if you give me a second. The benefits that I think that will provide, as I've said, will be making the grits cost less and the grunts cost more, i.e. needing the cost of living will go down, the money you get for your work, that will go up because labour will be in shorter supply, and things like housing, other capital items that you need, they will become cheaper because you won't have so many consumers all scrabbling for the same product. But I think it will have other effects as well. This is observable in history. So one, if I just show you this this tab here, if you look at did the bubonic plague lead to the Renaissance, you get 5.5 million hits. And basically, my point there is historians in general agree that in the middle of the 1300s, the 14th century, around about the 1350s, the Black Death throughout Europe, it had a devastating effect on the population. It reduced population numbers. And coming out of that, what you had was landowners, aristocrats or major big landowners, they still owned their vast estates. The problem was, for them, was really twofold. The main one was getting labour. Suddenly, there were fewer people, and that meant that the people, the workers that there were, peasants there were, they could suddenly demand more money, better conditions, and it also meant that they didn't have to be bound by feudal peasant terms of fealty, duty to one landlord, remaining tied to one estate. They could say, well, I can go and work for the aristocrat 10 miles up the road. He's desperate for labour as well. I don't have to be tied to you. So they became more free and more prosperous. They could negotiate for more easily for labour and for higher wages. What it also meant is there were fewer consumers for the goods, the food that major landowners would produce. So foodstuffs demand went down, so it was easier for ordinary people to buy food, to get food. They could get it a bit more cheaply, as well as demanding more for their labour. And that meant there was more margin in people's lives. And that just led to greater conditions of freedom. And that economic freedom led to a kind of intellectual freedom, which eventually percolated through a century later into characters like Thomas More or Erasmus, who were able to just think through philosophical and artistic and religious ideas that formed the Renaissance, the artistic philosophical Renaissance of the 16th, so the late 15th and 16th centuries. I certainly think it's right that the decline in population in the 14th century was a major condition, a major factor that led to the Renaissance and then to the Reformation, which in turn led to the Enlightenment. I think those factors of freedom, I think mental freedom, I think those tend to lead to quite aggressive creativity. I think you could see it in say Silicon Valley in the late 60s, this extreme freedom that went on in that part of California, leading to the Silicon Valley high-tech industry, which just hasn't happened in most other countries that didn't have that intellectual freedom. I think it happened in the early 18th century in Britain, which was remarkably free. I think that was a factor that led to the conditions that created the Industrial Revolution. And I certainly think that a peaceful repatriation of many millions of foreign populations from this country would lead to much greater conditions of freedom and security for ordinary populations, for ordinary people, indigenous populations, English people in this country, and that tends to lead to far greater creativity, and that's my point. I don't think it's simply purely about supply and demand. I think there are other factors involved, psychological factors involved. I would go so far as to say that I think it will lead to greater equality, not simply because poor people will be able to charge more for their labour, but I think if we are as concerned for social equality as we claim to be, we are going to have to get into the entrepreneurial forms of equality, and that is primarily that is really employee ownership. When you're talking about equality, you're talking about employee ownership, something that people are not interested in, but that's how you secure it. You don't get it through state activity. You don't get it through higher tax rates. Tax take has been going up and up and up for decades, and in tandem with that, inequality has been going up and up and up, and welfare payments have been going up and up and up, but still inequality has been rising and rising. So tax and welfare spending, that doesn't reduce inequality. The recent evidence is that it appears to, over the recent decades, it appears to increase it. If you want greater equality, you're going to have to get into forms of employee ownership. That's something that I've dealt with on my website. You can see it there, employee ownership on my website, where I provide a guide how to do it, and also the legal documents that set out the principles. It's a nerdy interest of mine. I just think this is the way society needs to go, and I think it's the way that society will go. And I can see that happening if you get mass repatriation out of this country. What you get is much richer, much more employment opportunities for ordinary people. One effect, I think, is a lot of employees will say, right, I can negotiate for higher wages here. But certainly I think, I'm not naive, I think a lot of employees will say, great, I'm not going to use it to negotiate for higher wages. I'm just going to become a slacker. I'm going to do a crap job. I'm going to take loads of sickies. I'm just not going to try very hard. I'm going to coast along. And my boss can't fire me because he can't replace me. As long as I'm sort of doing a rubbish job, I'm better than no one. And what that does is that creates an opportunity for entrepreneurial employees to say, we need to set up on our own so that we are employee owners. which means that we are motivated because we're not working for the man, we're working for ourselves and each other. We then have that disciplines us to want to work efficiently, effectively and well. And the competition where it's not employee owned, so it's just Fred Bloggs working for the man whom he hates, and he can slack off because there's a shortage of employees. That employer has no power to discipline his employees to work better. He can't threaten them with the sack because he can't sack them, because he can't replace them. That creates a greater margin of profitability for employee-owned businesses, and I think that's what we're likely to see. And I think that is the way, economically, that is the wave of the future. I think that is what we're likely to see, and I think the best way to achieve that would be to reduce the pool of labour by reducing or repatriating 99% of the foreigner population in this country. I think that would be entirely beneficial for us, psychologically beneficial. I think it would be economically beneficial. I think it would be creatively beneficial. I think it would be, on a basic societal level, it would be very energising and good for us. I think it would be a much brighter future if we were able to do that. Now, you don't have to, I agree with a lot of people, and you don't have to accept what I say about employee ownership there. I appreciate it's a niche, nerdy interest, although I think it's the way society needs to go. What I think is undeniable is that this figure here, just the sheer numbers of long-term sick, and pulling in all that 1.5 million people a year when you have that number of long-term sick, that is insane. There's no economic justification for that, particularly when you have a housing crisis. Or there is no reason why. And also when you have this problem here of foreign populations claiming so much in unemployment benefit and not really contributing all that much to the one thing they're supposed to be contributing to, which is the lousy NHS. And so I think what we need, what I'm hoping that people will start to say is, when they hear this argument, we need immigration. You hear it from a lot of civnats. I heard this fellow Matt Goodwin, who's all the rage at the moment, saying, oh no, we still need net immigration. He talks about net immigration of about 100,000 a year because we need it for social care, we need it for the NHS. I don't think he means it. But, well, I hope people will say, no, this is a total lie. The best thing for us would be to remove these populations, not simply to have no further immigration, but to not to have net zero, just have no immigration at all, and to remove the vast majority of the foreigner population in this country. I think it will be a great tonic. I think it will enliven the economy and create a much better future for it. And I hope that that is the message that you can at least mull over and have ready in your minds when you get told yet again by some enemy politician, some self-aggrandizing, self-empowering politician who says what a favour he's doing you by importing all these foreign populations. He's not. He's doing it because he wants to repress you. Thank you.